Virginia Woolf once said, "Every secret of a writer's soul, every experience of his life, every quality of his mind is written large in his works." Indeed, welcome to another truly inspiring episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. Today on our show, we have a speaker who has been featured in the list of top 50 thinkers in management across India and the Indian diaspora for 3 consecutive years. That indeed is a feat. This prominent person is not just an educationist, he is also an author, columnist, corporate citizen, a hobbyist, currently working as an adjunct professor at Schulich School of Business. He has written books that will captivate your mind and set your imagination on fire. His book, Games That Indians Play, is a bestseller and is a must-read. This person has a unique hobby of collecting old antique padlocks in India and has his collection featured in the Limca Book of Records in the year 2000. Yes, you heard it right. A journalist par excellence also collecting padlocks. Isn't that unusual? The next thing I'm going to tell you is that it might come to you as a surprise, but here it is. This successful human is also a cartoonist, has done cartooning for a national daily and has sketched his hand in competitive sketching too. I'm ecstatic to announce the presence of Dr. V. Raghunathan in Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. Welcome to the show, Dr. Raghunathan. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here today because there is so many questions I want to ask you. I don't even know where to start, because am I going to talk to you on your hobby, cartooning, journalists, your management skills? Oh, there's too many things to ask. Further, I also know that you are a Tamilian. That in itself tells me about your genes and about the intelligentsia, but you were also brought up in Punjab and Haryana, but also did a stint in Jammu and Kashmir. So let's just look at it. And how was your early schooling and how did you actually grow up? What were your early days like?
Thank you, Kamini. You've been most gracious. You've given me a larger than life build, and especially after looking at some of the people you have interviewed in this forum in the past, I feel most honored. Thank you very much for this honor. You have asked me about my early years, and yeah, as you rightly said, I am Tamilian, basically from Trichy. But my parents never lived there. My dad was in the armed forces in his earlier years. So I was born in Ambala, which was Punjab then, today it's Haryana. I did my early schooling from the Air Force School in Ambala, and then we were transferred to Jammu. And so early 6 years or so we spent in Jammu, and much of my childhood was formed there. But the hallmark which singled me out as a kid essentially was that I started school at the age of 2 because I wanted to accompany my sisters, elder sisters, to the school. And once I went to the nursery, of course the only requirement was that you had a good sleep and you should be toilet trained, and with these two I met the requirement, so to speak. But when the end of the year came and the rest of the kids were being moved to the lower KG and I was being held back in nursery, I kicked up a big ruckus saying that no way I'm going to be left behind. I want to move with all the rest. So then the teacher said, okay, I might as well sleep in the other room rather than this room. So I was put on to lower KG and so on and so forth. Turns out that I was always about 2 to 3 years younger in my class, because there was another one error made by my father when we moved from Ambala to Jammu in admitting me to the school. Fathers those days weren't as hands-on, and especially we were 4 of us at that time. So at the age of 13, I would end up matriculating later. So one thing was, and you've seen my height, on shoes I stand 5 foot 5 inches. So I was one of the shortest kids, one of the smallest kids, and the youngest one. Easily bullyable, easily adorable for teachers maybe, and therefore even a good fodder for the bullies further, and so forth. And it's not as if I was particularly brilliant or I was a child prodigy or anything. I was an above average kid, but competing with kids 2 to 3 years older to me. But the typical middle class pressures of wanting to be among the top 5 at least in the classroom always worked on me, and it was always very difficult because I wasn't nowhere near that. So it was a very average childhood. I never won any prizes in the school. I could never compete effectively in sports because of my size, and being much younger, I wasn't up to scratch while playing in the school. And playing with the younger kids was always an infra-dig, so it was always a no-no. So no awards ever in sports, no awards in academia, no awards even in a picnic sack race for that matter. So it was one of those very, very colorless kind of childhood. And then of course when I was in class, passing out from class 8, we were transferred back to Ambala as it turns out. And so I happened to matriculate from Punjab University Chandigarh, and I also did my undergrad from Punjab University Chandigarh. Of course I could read and write Punjabi, speak Punjabi very well, though I couldn't read and write Tamil even to this day for that matter. But yes, so what happened is, since I wasn't particularly brilliant academically, I mean, I might have been above average, but because of this age gap, at that age, to be 2 or 3 years younger makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
So I did a very ordinary college. I went to Sanatan Dharam College. Interestingly, Sushma Swaraj was my 2-year senior in the college, and we were debating partners those days. I used to debate in English because that didn't get affected by the fact that I was younger or shorter or whatever. So I could do things like dramatics I was quite on to, and things like debating and declamations and so forth. So I just did my BSc, and again in BSc, by the time it was second year, I was struggling even to pass my BSc. I had a supplementary exam to take to clear my second year of BSc, and I got 48% marks in BSc second year. And I was all of 15 when I had entered my BSc second year. Now that is when it hit me, because my mother started showing the signals of deep trauma, not because she was pressurizing me in any way, but she was wondering what would happen to me, because she asked me to drop a year several times, which I refused to do, out of ego. She would say, look, dropping a year doesn't matter, life is a long thing, you will be more with your age group. I never listened to her. But now it struck me that if I get a third class BSc, because 50% was required to be a second class and 60% aggregate of second and final year put together in the final year. So if I didn't, it was as good as being a college dropout, because some of my 1 or 2 year older friends who were college dropouts or who had got a third class were working as a mechanic somewhere, or somebody was selling vegetables in the sabji mandi. So it was a very harrowing time. It was about that time that I also read a book called Napoleon by Emil Ludwig.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which was my game changer, so to speak. One fine day I decided, because I read things like how he would catch on sleep only on horseback and so forth, and he could manage with 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night and so forth. And at the age of 24, he was a general who was going into wars. So that was the time I decided, hey, look here, if I'm an average bloke, I'll remain average. But if I work twice as much as the other guy, maybe I'll go twice as far for whatever it is worth. And one goal I had at the time was I must get a comprehensive first class in the BSc, which meant I had to get 78% marks in the final,
yeah.
72% marks in the final to get an aggregate of 60%. Because 48 I had in the second year. Unless I got 72, I wouldn't get an aggregate of 60. But even saying this to people, because those days the university toppers used to get 73, 74% marks. Now, where was I going to get 72 after getting 48% in second year BSc?
Absolutely.
But I said, you know, and I made it public so that the shaming will put greater pressure on me. So I didn't do it quietly. I told everyone who was willing to listen that this year I'm planning to crack 72%. Okay. So that's how I started the habit of working till 3:30 in the morning. I found a friend who was a studious friend. We would team up together. I would work till 3:30 in the morning. Through the year I worked. And when I finished, I didn't get 72%. I got about 68.5%. But at least I got a 59% aggregate.
Okay.
Which was a signal that if I put my heart to it,
you can do it.
I could do it.
Excellent.
And that was the time where it became my habit till I was about 45 or 46. I would sleep only 3.5 hours to 4 hours a night and worked. And I decided henceforth I will not be number 2 in whatever I do, at least in terms of efforts put in. And then to kill a year, because I was 17 when I passed out from my BSc. I didn't even know where to do which area to go into, because an MSc in physics or chemistry would only be a college laboratory assistant. So MBAs weren't willing to take me because I was too young. So I had to kill a year. I did a postgraduate diploma in statistics.
Wow.
And then I applied for an MBA from the University of Jodhpur, which was among the better. Those days there were only 2 IIMs which I hadn't heard of, because living in Ambala I didn't even know about them. There were 5 universities offering something called an MBA, which I didn't know about, but I was in Jodhpur playing All India Inter-University Chess Tournament. I was a very keen chess player. As I said, again, chess didn't call for a stature, so I could play well. And there I met one of my old college friends who I asked him, what are you doing here? He said, I'm doing something called MBA. So I asked him, what does it mean? He said, Masters in Business Administration. I said, what? So what are the job prospects? He said, oh, you get very good jobs immediately. And that university used to take 15 students a year. So he said that the department is right here, you can pick up the form and apply. And I did that. And there was a written test, and I got in and got an MBA for whatever it was worth. But after getting my MBA, I went to join the Indian Navy.
Okay.
So I started my career with Indian Navy. There is yet another story why I chose to leave that.
Short Service Commission or what?
No, I was on regular commission through the Indian Naval Academy, INS Vendruthi in Cochin. And but there were various reasons why I finally changed my mind and I quit. But what I'm trying to say is, those are all the years which were very unremarkable till it became remarkable in the sense that I learned to work hard. And I found that beyond a point, if you are continuously hardworking, nobody can tell the difference between being very bright or hard work. You know, and usually hard work takes you further than just being bright and only riding on that alone. So yes, so those are the, you know, I then, once I came out of the Navy, I joined the Coal India Limited. Because those days, you know, when we were reading Kierkegaard and, Franz Kafka, existential literature of the time, private sector was a no-no in our mindset. The MBA was done because in the hope some job will come through, but it didn't mean I was in my mind a private sector person at that time. So I joined the Coal India as a finance officer at the age of 20, and I did that for about 3 years. Then I said, look, this is not how I'm going to end my life, so I must aim for something more. So I came to IIM Calcutta for a PhD. And even that I finished in a record time of 2 years. In fact, till date, that's one of the fastest dissertations. I taught there. I finished my PhD there and went to teach at IIM Ahmedabad. So, much of what happened is not planned, is not something very focused where one can say I aimed at something and went for it. No. But what I had learned very early was, if you are going to do something, do it with all your heart in it. Yes, you can fall in love and marry. But if you are not lucky enough to fall in love and marry and learn to fall in love. Okay. There's one way of being happy in life, So I said, okay, I may not have known what my passion was. And yes, my passion was chess in those days. But of course, I knew upfront I wasn't a grandmaster material ever. They come cut from a different cloth, to be honest. So knowing that, academic was the only option for us as a survival mode. And I found if I worked hard, there was nothing that I couldn't do. I did reasonably well in everything thereafter. And I started teaching IIM Ahmedabad. My 20 years at IIM Ahmedabad were among the best of my years ever. I made a full professor at the age of 32. And
that's really good.
Yeah, because I was joined as an assistant professor, became an associate professor, and became a full professor at 32. And I had, I was doing everything right. I had my publications. I was on the boards. I was a busy consultant. And that's when I was about 45, 46, I decided I don't want to die teaching. So that's how I made a transition to the corporate sector. I came to head the Vysya Bank at that time, which
that
was,
must have been a really
I came as a CEO designate of Vysya Bank and continued 2 years plus 2 years, 4 years with ING Vysya Bank. And that's how I came into the industry. And then the Vysya Bank belonged to the GMR group. So, but once it was sold to ING, it was all ING's call thereafter. So I moved to head the foundation of the GMR group for the next 15 years. And during this period is when I also, all through, because I was an academic, I was anyway beginning to write articles also to popularize purely academic subjects. So I was a regular columnist in Economic Times, Hindustan Times, Financial Express, and so on, and several magazines of that era, India Today, India World, and so forth. So I started becoming a regular columnist. And those days, of course, the books I wrote were all finance-oriented books, portfolio management, stock exchanges, and so forth. But after I quit the bank, I started writing more popular books. So I've written about 10 books with HarperCollins and Penguin. You already pointed out that Games Indians plays among the bestsellers. And most of the books are in different genres. So effectively, that has been largely the pathway to my life. And somewhere along the way, when I was in Ahmedabad, I used to go to Sabarmati riverbed where there was a flea market, where I started picking up these old locks. The first lock, of course, I picked up somewhere else, which is a different story we'll come to. But yeah, so, and in 84 is when I got married and to Meena.
How was that? How was it? Chance meeting?
It was my sister who should be credited with the fact, because she was living in Jodhpur. Meena's father was a director of defense lab in Jodhpur, and she knew them. And she told me, why don't you meet her, and so on. So we met, and then 6 months we took making up our minds. And finally we decided to marry, and that's been the best decision of my life.
Wow.
And it has remained so. So I gave a long answer, but that's it.
No, but so what would you say, Raghu, is the best recipe for a successful marriage?
I think it's simple. Respect for each other. I think the fanciful love disappears after the first 6 or 7 years.
But that's a long time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, considering one is married 35 years plus now, it is mutual respect, which is the key for a happy and a lasting and a successful marriage. It's as simple as that.
Can you define that mutual respect? I mean, it seems to be like an encompassing, the sky is blue and the grass is green. What do you mean by mutual respect?
Basically giving space to each other, not imposing your views, whether it is in terms of home or outside or career or friends or time that you spend. Don't be too restrictive in your expectations and expecting the other person to meet it and so forth. And I think in that sense, we have both given each other enormous space, which has allowed, for instance, for 5 years in between, I was in Bangalore while I was heading the bank, and Meena was in Ahmedabad. We had no problem, living separately from each other and flying up and down once a fortnight or something. Now, of course, it helped that we chose not to have children. If one had
that
children,
was a
maybe
very
that
strong
one.
decision.
Yeah, that's right. So again,
You don't regret that?
well, not really. We like children. We like our friends' children. We even have a foster grandchild at home because our housekeeper is like a foster son to me, and his baby is our foster grandchild. We love children. But at that time, at least for me personally, India was an overpopulated country, and I thought one didn't need to add to it, and one could always adopt a child if one wanted to, and thus give a better life to an existing child. Meena had reasons of her own. So we chose not to have children. And those days, of course, in a lighter vein, when people said you will need children in old age, I used to say in old age you need a big bank balance, not children. Children will be sitting in the US of A. What good will they be to you?
But that is true, because I have seen many people, and surprisingly or ironically, you're talking to an IVF specialist. So if you say this, then I'll be out of job. But what you say rings a lot of truth, because most of the time, even if you have the children, because they have their own lives,
Right.
and you have an empty nest syndrome.
Correct.
So you keep on looking after them,
Correct.
and a day comes when they get married and
Right.
then they move out.
And it's unfair to expect that they should take care of
They
you.
should not. And so what happens is you're left, in the care of some housekeeper, etc. So that's what you're doing now.
That's right.
So, and you're saying that the housekeeper has a child, and that's your foster.
That's a
child.
foster child.
I think that's
And
very
we have
practical.
underwritten the life for that kid.
So that's
Or our earlier maid had a son who's today an assistant company secretary in Infosys. We were educating him, and that gives us enormous joy. So why do you need your own children?
That's true. I mean, that's a very practical way of looking at it. I mean, I have no doubt about it. And no doubt your wife Meena is also a very busy person, and she's got a big job of her own.
Yeah.
And I think this happens when there is some amount of give and take between the couple.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what happens is each one sort of, at least early in the marriage, sort of dominates the other to say where is their territorial rights. So each one tries to draw a line. This is what I want to gain, and this is what I want to gain. And I think India has been, historically a very patriarchal society.
That's true.
And it becomes that, we in India have succumbed to the fact that the male is a dominant species. And I don't blame the male, but I think for every woman, it's another woman who actually creates this kind of an environment.
That is
and
so
I think
true.
until the woman, the mother, tells her son that you have to treat your sister equally,
Absolutely.
and you have to her son, treat his wife
Correct.
equally.
Correct.
This will never happen.
Absolutely well said. Fortunately, my mother had instilled that amongst all of us. We are 5 siblings totally, 2 brothers and 3 sisters. And nobody was any more equal than anybody else. We were all absolutely equal. We would all help in the house or whatever. And of course, my problem came from somewhere else. I used to have a very short temper, those days. I would be highly driven and taught, and, today I'm a much better person in terms of anger management than I used to be. I have some regrets on that score. But it was never a male chauvinist kind of an angle which ever created any stress for my poor wife.
That you are saying, I must ask your wife.
Sure.
So that's really good, because this is what I want to hear from people, because as I go along and I keep hearing this, it's always a one-sided story. But the fact that you say giving space to the woman and the woman giving space to the man, it's not always the man. It's also
both
sometimes
ways.
the woman.
Absolutely.
It's both ways. And that's what I feel. Now, having played chess, I think it really tickles the grey cells in the brain, because it's such an intelligent game. And looking at your name, had you ever a chance to play with the Grandmaster Vishwanath? Anand?
No. I was nowhere in that league in any case. You see, you can become I was ranked all India also at that stage, but that's nothing. Grandmasters are a different league altogether. I played an international master who beat me like crazy, So I wasn't in the same league as the big timers. Yes, I was good. Yeah, and I was young. At the age of 17, I gave up chess. I have not played chess since the age of 17 when I played my last tournament, national tournament.
But why did you give it up?
You see, after that, I had this thing of working to prove myself, to make something of myself, when I would sleep only at 3:30 in the morning, and I learned that hard work never killed anyone. And there to take time off for chess became difficult for several years, and then the life overtook you,
Why did you take finance? What made you get into finance?
Okay, you see, with a background as BSc, I had some sort of quantitative background, mathematics and physics and so on. In management, everything else looked too fuzzy to me. Production engineering would be more for engineers. I was not an engineer. Marketing, psychology, organization behavior, economics looked a little too soft to me. So I thought finance was something which was a little more quantifiable. And IIM Calcutta was the best known in those days when I joined in 79, 81 for finance and control. So I joined, I applied for a PhD in IIM Calcutta precisely for that reason. And once I made it, and once you have a PhD in finance, you have to find something to do in finance. So I became an assistant professor in finance at IIM Ahmedabad and so on. So that is how it became finance. Again, it was more accidents. But the thing is to make those accidents work for you.
But you didn't think of chartered accountancy and all that?
Once I had done my PhD, I didn't even have to go back to chartered accountant. I taught accounting for several years. I was on the board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India's Accounting Standards Board. But I was never a chartered accountant myself. I didn't need to, because by then one knew reasonably whatever a chartered accountant would, except the company law maybe. But accounting wise, we used to teach more of theory of accounting than the mechanics of accounting, which is what chartered accountancy usually used to concentrate on. We used to concentrate on the theory of accounting. So we even had our nose up in there about chartered accountants between us.
No, but having done this, so you had this stint with the ING Vysya, and then you had this stint with you also went into the GMR group in the
manufacturing side.
Manufacturing side.
Right.
How was that?
That was just a couple of years as the managing director of GMR Industries, which was essentially into sugar plants. There were 3 plants that we had at the time. But that was, I entered that more to understand the ethanol market. Because a big buzz a few years ago, and now again it's coming back, was ethanol as a substitute to fossil fuels.